Hi, everyone. We're just letting people in.
There it is. Hi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tara, and I am the founder and CEO of Social Tea. We have a really wonderful, large group coming in today to hear Gabby share her wisdom on this amazing topic of inclusivity and diversity and accessibility on social media. People are still trickling into the room, so we're going to give them one more minute, and then we'll allow Gabby to share with us. So just please bear with us as we allow a few more people into this webinar. A few admin items as we await the last couple people. Gabby will be answering all of your questions that you place in the chat or want to verbally ask at the end of her presentation. So be sure to take notes and just jot down what you want to ask Gabby, and she'd be happy to answer any questions you have. As well, there's going to be some great dialogue happening in the chat, and Melody and I on the Social Tea team will be watching that and tuning in and being sure to respond to any comments. Now that it's 3:03 and we want to make sure we dive right into our topic, let's get started. Gabby is a digital marketer and social media expert. She's been in this space for over 12 years and has an amazing amount of experience managing the online presence for businesses. She's actually been on the Social Tea team since 2018, and she's helped some of our biggest clients, from the real estate industry to insurance to, gosh, professional services and all the brands that we work with their social media, from strategy to management. What you might not know about Gabby is that she has a master's degree in media and journalism from Newcastle University in the UK. And she's also originally from Montreal, so she's bilingual, which is awesome. And she really loves to focus on digital communication and diversity studies. And this topic has been one that we've been wanting to share in a webinar format for quite some time. And Gabby so kindly is taking a leap and doing her first major format webinar for all of us. So I'm thrilled to give Gabby the reins and have her share with you all of the details on this very important topic that we're so passionate about at Social Tea. I think you're all going to learn learn a lot about diversity, inclusion, and accessibility on social media, and how you can incorporate more of those tools into your online presence. So now let's take it away, Gabby. We look forward to hearing from you on this important topic. And again, questions will be answered at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. So hi, everyone. My name is Gabrielle, and today I'll be talking to you about 5 ways to make your social media more diverse and inclusive. I want to thank you for registering to this webinar and for showing interest in a topic that's not only so vital for the overall success and growth of your social media, but it's so important that everyone from all backgrounds feel seen, heard, and represented online. Now, before I dive into the nitty-gritty of this webinar, I feel it's important that I define certain terms. More specifically, what is diversity, what is inclusion, and what does BIPOC mean? So diversity is defined as the characteristics or the traits that make people unique. Inclusion are the social norms that foster, promote, highlight, encourage those characteristics. Simply put, diversity is being invited to a party, and inclusion is being asked to dance at that party. BIPOC is an acronym for Black, Indigenous, People of Color, and it's a term that I feel comfortable using throughout this presentation. With that being said, I do suggest that when you are referencing different ethnic groups, that you be as specific as possible. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you are talking about Chinese people, say Chinese people. If you're talking about Indigenous people, say Indigenous people. So let's move to the first section of this webinar, where we'll be talking about how do we overcome that initial fear, that initial feeling of uncomfortableness that can sometimes be tied with sharing content online that's tied to diversity and inclusivity. So I want to start by saying it's 100% normal to feel uncomfortable when faced with the unfamiliar. But it's important to start where you are, sticking to your core corporate values, communicating with care and empathy, and displaying a willingness to learn and grow alongside your consumers, your audience, will allow you to build trust with them. In the event that you are scrolling through your feed and you come across content that you want to share that's tied to diversity and inclusivity, but you stop yourself because you're unsure, you're uncomfortable with how to approach the content and how to share it online, start by considering your brand. Who is your target demographic and how do you want to communicate with them? You choose how you're going to position yourself and your brand when taking a stand or talking about issues related to diversity and inclusivity. And that can look like taking a more active or a more passive approach, but the emphasis is on taking that step. So more specifically, you can choose to play the role of one that is supportive and more of an ally. And that can look like, for example, sharing a post where some of your proceeds or the sales of your events go to a certain cause or a BIPOC business. Sharing resources online on where to donate or where to support BIPOC businesses. Or becoming a mentor for a BIPOC entrepreneur. Alternatively, or simultaneously, you can also take the role, one that is more proactive. And that can look like taking anti-racist actions and supporting campaigns along that same line online. And this can look like, for example, changing your bio to showcase your support for various causes, people's identity, or whatnot. Sharing posts that showcase your stance on anti-racism. The next step you want to take is you want to look from a different perspective. Now, if you are looking to grow your social media reach by targeting a consumer group with whom you have no connection with in terms of identity, ethnicity, or major concerns, then you simply must take the time that's necessary to immerse yourself in getting to know them. Make learning a priority. And yes, this can take time and this can take resources, but once you've accumulated that data, listen, process, accept it as truth, and validate it. Now, another tip, another suggestion I give when faced with sharing content tied to diversity online and feeling that initial feeling of uncomfortableness or wariness with sharing is, you want to be authentic. So consumers, of course, can tell when a business or a brand is authentic or when they're simply regurgitating content or information that they think their consumers want to hear. You want to make your message believable, but also on brand. So, for example, if you're looking to for marketing images to promote your maternity boutique online, you should include transgender and non-binary folks. Trans and non-binary people can be pregnant too, and they deserve the same inclusive and affirming rights as cisgender folks. And that starts with language and representation. So the next part I like to call the what if. So working in this industry now for over a decade, I've come across a lot of business owners who are afraid of sharing content tied to diversity and inclusivity because of the fear of alienating a segment of their business, or because it could be sensitive subject matters. And of course, this is important, and I want to emphasize this, is that aside from the morally right thing to do with taking a stand, from a business perspective, and this is so important, from a business perspective, diverse and inclusive content is a long-term economic gain. And what I mean by that is, to be perfectly honest, diverse and inclusive content sells. Okay, and why is that? Because markets are changing, and millennials now represent the largest group of consumers, and that's just the beginning. And do you know what millennials want? They want diverse and inclusive content. But let's talk facts, because I don't know about you, but I'm a numbers person, so I do want to share with you some data here. So a Google study found that 64% of those surveyed said that they took some sort of action, including purchase, after seeing an ad that they considered to be diverse and inclusive. A study from Deloitte agency Heat found that representation in online ads correlated with an increase in both stock price and public perception. And a recent Facebook poll revealed that when brands showcase diversity, it has a wide range of positive effects, including helping to drive purchases and loyalty. 59% of consumers polled said that they prefer to buy from brands that stand for diversity and inclusivity online. I want to finish this section of the webinar by sharing with you some questions that you can use as a guide when you're faced with the prospect of sharing content related to diversity and inclusivity online. Ask yourself these questions. Where in the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or systemic inequity, does it make sense for my company to weigh in? Not every issue deserves or needs a response online. Some things can be taken behind the scenes within your business. Where are the gaps in my own organization's education, and how can we further our own education? What questions might our audience online have right now where we could provide, as a business, helpful and valuable insight? How can we be there for those in our brand's community who are looking for support or resources from us? So let's move to the second part of this webinar. How do we create a social media content plan that reaches your goals of diverse and inclusive content? So it's important to create social media content, of course, that focuses on diversity and inclusion, but developing your brand's position in a way that's rooted in your business's values will ensure that you have a sustained and meaningful social media content plan. Okay, you want your content plan to align with your core business values. So the first thing to do is you want to do a diversity audit on your social media feed. So a diversity audit is such a simple but yet eye-opening way to see if the content that you are sharing and promoting online is diverse and inclusive. No matter what type of content that you create or consume or share, there are opportunities to make it inclusive and diverse, especially if you want to reach and resonate with a broader audience. So take a close look when you are doing your diversity audit. Take a close look at brands and influencers you follow, engage, and collaborate with. Are you following BIPOC and inclusive accounts, businesses, and thought leaders? Are you amplifying the voice unbeknownst to you of someone who might be considered harmful to the BIPOC community. It's important to remember that your followers can see who you follow, who you interact with. So it's important to be very mindful of who you follow on your corporate page and even your own personal page when it relates to diversity and inclusion. While you're putting together creative assets and gouging representation, are you choosing models and images with intention? Are you taking into consideration the deaf and blind community with the posts that you create? Evaluate your top posts. Are you unaware that you're appropriating elements of a marginalized culture? Are your images representative of all your community members? Are your posts accessible to everyone? And so step 2, you want to make space for BIPOC content. So how do you do that? Start with a diversity and inclusive calendar. And this could look like a complete list of important dates that celebrate equity, diversity, and inclusion. Follow diverse influencers and thought leaders, some of whom have large following, and you can follow and see how they use their voice for justice and inequity and the conversation of diversity. Choose diverse and inclusive imagery that is on brand, and highlight BIPOC businesses. And this can look like adding your support for BIPOC brands in your highlight section on your Instagram, as you could see here in the examples. So moving on to the third part of this webinar, how do we share BIPOC content across different social media channels? So listening and learning, of course, comes before strategy, but where do you begin? The starting point is really to acknowledge that there is a need for diverse and inclusive content, and to foster an environment for safe dialogues online. Share content created by BIPOC and marginalized communities, and always tag their work. On Instagram, tagging a picture allows the person who's tagged to know that their work is being acknowledged. As much as possible, be mindful and try to work with BIPOC and marginalized influencers. They have a very loyal following, and it could be a very valuable asset to your brand in so many magnificent and wonderful ways. Use your platform to spread the message from BIPOC and marginalized creators, entrepreneurs, and leaders. Reply or comment to express support for diverse, equity, and inclusive postings. At a minimum, like and comment on the original BIPOC and inclusive post. Amplify BIPOC voices by spotlighting BIPOC creators, entrepreneurs, and BIPOC-owned brands in your industry. There are so many talented BIPOC and marginalized people on social media to follow, but I did want to share with you a list here, and then you could reference this a little later because I'll be sharing this slide with you at the end of this webinar. But here's just a list of some incredible content creators that I encourage you all to follow. Now, moving on to the fourth topic of this webinar. I want to share with you tips on how to incorporate BIPOC content into your social media marketing plan. Start small, but start today. We don't need to overcomplicate it. Okay, I know this webinar, there's a lot of content to digest, but we don't need to overcomplicate it. You can start by liking and saving a post that inspires you. Create a folder list on your Instagram page titled BIPOC accounts, Indigenous accounts, Black accounts to follow. Reference this list when you want to share BIPOC content. Define what diversity and inclusivity means to your brand, to your business. Set realistic goals. Make a 30, 60, 90-day plan for your DEI growth. In 3 months, review and analyze your progress. So I want to share with you the importance of inclusive content online. Without inclusiveness and accessibility on social media, as a business, you will miss on connecting with your full potential audience. At least 1 billion people, and that's 15% of the global population, experiences some form of disability. In Canada, according to the Canadian Survey on Disability, more than 22% of the population in Canada, aged 15 and up, identify as having a disability. Non-inclusive content and experiences can push people away. And it's not always easy to pinpoint when that happens in your funnel. Excluded web visitors often don't complain, according to Hootsuite. 75% just leave. Inclusive language and design acknowledges and values every person, respecting their individual identity, inviting their participation. It helps you as a business and a brand avoid unintentionally silencing, offending, or minimizing a segment of your audience. So here's a few tips to promote inclusiveness and accessibility on social media. Don't overuse caps. Use camel case. And this is what camel case looks like. Full caps can be difficult to read and misinterpreted by screen readers. So use camel cases for multi-word hashtags. This means capitalizing the first letter of each word to make hashtags more legible and to prevent screen readers' gaffes. Put hashtags and mentions as often as possible at the end of your post. Punctuation marks are read out loud by screen readers. And so you want to be mindful of how hashtags or mention can disrupt that copy, can disrupt that flow. Avoid saying click here as a call to action. Use a more descriptive call to action like sign up or try it for free or subscribe. Limit emoji use. I know emojis are so popular, they're so fun, but when you read emojis out loud with assistive text, it's very disruptive. And people that are hard of hearing so people can hear things like loudly crying out loud. So before you, or it could be misinterpreted. So before you use one, research it to see how it works. Provide descriptive image captions. And so this can look like, for example, when you're showing a video or you're going on live, it's so important to allow people to visualize and to see exactly what you're referencing to. And so that's for video captions. So everyone benefits from video captions. 92% of people view videos with the sound off. And videos with caption provide an SEO advantage. So, but more importantly, they're necessary to provide meaning for your viewers who may be hearing impaired. So there's so much more to discuss here, and this topic, of course, demands a lot more time. So we will be following up with more information and sharing with you more content in the near future tied to accessibility and inclusiveness. So for the last part of this webinar, I'll be discussing how to avoid performative activism. So performative activism is a type of activism that's solely rooted in increasing one's social clout. So social capital, in other words. So rather than being devoted genuinely to a cause. So activism, of course, and when you take a stand tied to your business values, it can begin and end with a hashtag. So how can you avoid performative activism? Start by informing yourself. Engage in ways to confront your own biases. Read on the history of BIPOC and marginalized community. Ask questions and look for the answer. Take action in real life. For every post on social media that you share that's tied to diversity and inclusivity, challenge yourself to an act of allyship that no one else will know about. Be consistent. What you say on social media should be the exact same things you value and promote within your company and within your brand. So we've reached the end of today's webinar, and we've covered a lot of content. And I hope you can take the time in the next few days to really let the information sink in. Of course, I'll be taking some questions, so please feel free to ask me anything that comes to mind. This is a safe space, and I want you to know that there is no quote unquote stupid questions. Feel free to ask anything that you feel you need to know. But I want to conclude with this. More than 1/5 of Canadians are people of color. And by 2036, people of color are projected to be about 1/3 of the Canadian population. In the United States alone, racial and ethnic minorities make up nearly half of the population. And in the next decade, US ethnic minority groups will make up more than half of the US population. These are your consumers. These are your clients. Is your social media an accurate and honest representation of society's makeup? You have to remember that truly diverse and inclusive content, the kind of content that resonates on a conscious and subconscious level, requires far more than an image. It requires thinking more deeply, from your audience research to your team structure, to your website, to your social media. Positive change could be as simple as starting productive conversations, liking a post, or calling for donation. Every act counts. But no matter what, we must remember that we all have biases, some more detrimental than others. And it's important that we acknowledge those biases and work to identify, understand, and unlearn them. So Harvard has a free implicit bias test that I've added at the end of this webinar presentation that I encourage everyone to take, because it just allows us to really further that discussion. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time. And I'll be answering questions. So yes, Tara. I think she's...
Wow, that was really great. Thank you so much.